Rainy day out. Hear that rain? Meditative. Perfect type of weather to dive into some juicy Joey Murphy. If there's one thing that hopefully is clear with all these rants and raves and meditations we do in the car, hopefully the one thing that is clear is that when it comes to law of attraction, law of assumption, manifesting stuff, you can be flexible. You can be flexible. Just do what works for you. Don't listen to good old Papa Bear Daddy Tim. Listen to yourself. What works best for you today? Doesn't have to necessarily be the technique you'll use tomorrow. Doesn't have to necessarily be a technique, period. I think one reason that people like hearing my advice about LOA stuff is because I'm not really an LOA teacher. I'm just a dude. I'm a spiritual counselor. I'm a stress management person, counselor, and I'm a writer. I'm like you. I'm just trying to implement these ideas in the same way you are. And I like to share how I implement them and how I've, helped other people implement them better. But the one thing I've constantly found is that you have to be flexible, and you should be flexible, and it's wonderful to be flexible when it comes to these ideas. And obviously, it's also wonderful to feel inwardly relaxed and at peace. And if, as I often say, if you just know about these concepts, like the general concepts that we're talking about how your thinking, your imagination shapes your internal and external world to some significant degree. As long as you know about that stuff and you just do your best to inwardly feel more relaxed as you go through your day and inevitably run into stuff and inevitably have feelings that seem uncomfortable and are quote unquote negative, but do your best to just maintain some sense of equilibrium and, peace amidst all of that hustle and bustle. And just, assume to the best of your abilities that things are going okay and getting better and that you're doing your best and that things are going to work out for the best. If you just do that, things are going to get better. We're always talking about the same stuff. And we're certainly not talking about just affirmations or a certain technique. I think most of you know that, right? The reason we're talking about Coué so much, the reason we mention Murphy so much, it's not because they talk about affirmations a lot. It's because these guys get the underlying principles that make LOA work in our lives well. They get the psychological principles about belief. And that is something that is hard to explain, and both Coué and Murphy explain it very well. So let's dive back into the power of your subconscious mind, back into this chapter about, building more of a wealth consciousness, or as we've really been talking about, bringing out the quality that is within us, that is abundant, that is supply, that we all have. Even if we deny it, it's still there. There's an inherent abundance within us. How can we bring it out more? I'm going to read the last paragraph I read yesterday again because it's so good and it leads us to the next section very well. Murphy wrote, "Your affirmation succeeds best when it is specific and when it does not produce a mental conflict or argument." Now, when Murphy says specific there, he doesn't mean it has to be very specific. I'm going to make $758 tomorrow. It's more like you know what you want. You're specific about what you want. It can be general, though, in the sense of it's like if you know you want wealth, you're being specific enough, if that feels right to you, okay? You want it to not produce a mental conflict or argument. That's the key. And Murphy was saying, hence the statements made by this man who did not have success using affirmations, even though he was doing them for months. The statements made by this man made matters worse for him because they suggested his lack. And these are the two lines that I really want you to consider deeply. As I mentioned yesterday, Murphy said, your subconscious accepts what you really feel to be true, not just idle words or statements. The dominant idea or belief is always accepted by the subconscious mind. That is why we always are referencing Joey Murphy. That is why we're always referencing Emile Coué. Not because they are telling us how to use affirmations. Affirmations are simply a tool to help us do this. And so is journaling. So is the letting go process. So are visualizations. So is vision boarding. So is whatever wazoo babu benini. We can utilize any technique and be totally flexible to do this. This is what we want to do. We want the subconscious to accept what we feel to be true. We want that to be positive, and we don't want to just use idle words or techniques. We want to establish the dominant idea or belief that we want. And remember what Coué always says. He says your subconscious is basically, that word subconscious is essentially synonymous with your imagination. So let me put that word in instead for these two lines here that Murphy wrote. Your imagination accepts what you really feel to be true, not just idle words or statements. The dominant idea or belief is always accepted by your imagination. The dominant idea or belief is always accepted by your imagination. So it doesn't matter if you're using willpower if your imagination says that's bullshit. That's not actually what you really believe. Like I want to become healthier. I want to become healthier. But your imagination's saying, no, you don't actually believe that. You're thinking about how you're unhealthy still. It doesn't happen. This is why we're always talking about Coué and Murphy. So Murphy writes in this next section, how to avoid mental conflict. This obviously is a direct correlation to what we just talked about. The following is the ideal way to overcome this conflict for those who have this difficulty. Make this practical statement frequently, particularly prior to sleep. By day and by night, I am being prospered in all of my interests. This affirmation will not arouse any argument because it does not contradict your subconscious mind's impression of financial lack. I suggested to one businessman whose sales and finances were very low and who was greatly worried that he sit down in his office, become quiet, and repeat this statement over and over again. My sales are improving every day. This statement engaged the cooperation of the conscious and subconscious mind. Results followed. Now, again, what Murphy just said, it's a great technique. You can use this technique. In my very short guide, 5-Minute Finances, I share a similar technique. It's like what Coué always talks about. It's intentionally general enough that it won't offend your conscious mind and your subconscious mind. You know, in 5-Minute Finances, I say every day in every way, I'm getting wealthier and wealthier, or I'm prospering more and more, or my sales are improving every day, or I'm becoming gradually more and more wealthy. You know, lines like that. Your imagination's much more willing to accept them, generally speaking, than very specific things that are clearly not true in the present. Like, I'm a millionaire when you don't have any money. Or, you know, have very little money, I should say. So, by day and by night, I am being prospered in all of my interests. That's a great general line. And again, that's why saying a simple word like wealth, 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 over and over again can be so effective because there's nothing to contradict that in your mind imaginatively. If you just say wealth over and over again, and it doesn't have to be that word, it could be any word that you want to say that resonates with you. When it comes to money, I find for a lot of people, including myself, wealth is a very strong word to use. You can just say wealth over and over again for 5-10 minutes at a time. Do it a couple times a day. See what happens. Or spend 20 minutes doing it. Maybe you're taking a walk. You just start saying wealth over and over again for 20 minutes in a row. You'll feel better probably. But this is not about affirmations. This is about why we do things like affirmations. But it could be anything, any technique to get your subconscious, your imagination to positively accept what you want to be true, what you really feel to be true and what you want to be true. That's what you want to do. The dominant idea or belief is always accepted by the imagination, by your subconscious. So if we have a negative belief, we want to replace it with a positive belief. Simple to say, harder to implement most of the time. But that's okay. That's the practice. We're just gentle. We just do our best to relax inwardly while we go through the process. We don't judge ourselves harshly. It's all good. It's all good, man. You know what I'm saying? It's all good. If you want my help, radicalcounselor.com. Tim, Papa Bear Daddy, talking to you live from the car with the rain falling. Have a good one.